Yes, this is also your home, please. Yeah, whenever you're traveling, be comfortable.
You know, the Turkish soldiers who took our people, our boys, they really thought they were doing them a favor because they were bringing them into Islam and giving them nourishment. Well, I don't see it as a negative thing.
No, it's not. It is a favor. Because the initiary is not, they didn't conscript them to become laborers, or to become slaves, working with manure, or to be laborers here. The initiary is a crack elite unit that is only answerable to the Sultan. So understand now, if the press that we're given about the Muslim conquerors, the Turkish conquerors, who forcibly took Christian boys from unwilling parents to come and to serve the rest of their lives next to the Sultan. What a mistake that would be, to put the children of your enemies next to the Sultan, where they still have within living memory of their own faith and of their own parents. It is, as our Shaykh told us, there are so many Muslim parents who would pretend that they are not Muslims to try to have their children conscripted. Yes, because it is to be trained as a Yanishari is to be set for life. It is maybe akin to West Point or something even higher than that.
Well, in point of fact, there were a few of these conscripted boys who became viziers and second only in authority to the Sultan himself.
It would be foolishness.
It was a meritocracy, and it worked very well.
That is something that I appreciate coming from Singapore. Meritocracy.
Oh, is that the way it was there?
That is the way that is told to us, and by and large. Of course, other factors also come in play, you know. But you are judged by not your race or your religion, but how useful you can be, according to your merit, to serve the people in the empire. And you cannot have a system of meritocracy if it is pure colonialism. It is impossible.
Not possible.
It's impossible. It is easy to conquer. It is easy to conquer. It is very difficult to rule. And it's almost impossible to rule justly for hundreds of years. The easy way out, like we talked about before, is just to change their language, change their religion, or make them to become subjects that forever aspire to be as like the colonial masters. But you can never be. And so for the rest of our lives, we'll be like trained monkeys. But that is a policy that, like we said before, that the Ottomans, and I want to say Ottomans as opposed to the Turks, because again, in Turkish, the idea was Ottomanism, that they say that is a name given to everyone under our realm, be they Christian, Jewish or Muslim, Turkish, Arab, or whatever race that you belong to. Although, in fact, one of the reasons why the revolution happened in Ottoman Turkey, but the Young Turks, one of their claims is that because the Ottomans favored the other races and religions more than they do their own Turkish people. So it became nationalism.
Oh.
It became nationalism.
I know something went wrong in the Ottoman Empire toward the end.
Yes.
There was a woman named Oksana who was, you know about...
Yeah, it was earlier. Oksana.
Wasn't she the consort of Suleiman?
She was a wife. The only sultan with the only wife.
She was that? She was, you know, from Ukraine, I think.
Yes, I know. She accepted the way, she accepted the religion, she became a beloved of the sultan. And
was she the mother of Selim?
Yes. Yes, she was.
And he was less than, he had some problems.
He did work that was given to him, that was necessary for him.
There was Suleiman actually was at Mohaç and defeated the Lajos the first, the young king of Hungary at Mohaç in 1526. Yeah. Then it was in 1529 that was it Suleiman that laid siege to Vienna?
Yes.
In 1529,
I believe. Yes.
And it was a strange thing because the Viennese were able to maintain their they withstood the Turks, but they made some. Oh, thank you. Yeah. They made some sort of a pastry in the shape of a crescent, which they learned from the Turks somehow.
Well, until today, is the crescent, the croissant.
Croissant, yeah. Is it true? As far as you know?
It is true.
It is true.
That is the shape of Islam. There is the crescent moon. And in their hatred, they eat that.
Yes. And the hatred, is it? Well, I never took one to my mouth with a feeling of hatred.
No, because you're not living at that time and you don't understand what it means. It's like if Muslims were to make bread in the shape of a crucifix, right? To celebrate our victory over the Christians, and we're to celebrate it and we eat it. Okay, throughout centuries, maybe they lost the meaning, but
now, because you know, in some of the churches in Russia, there's a cross over the crescent on the top of the cupola, the domes.
Yes.
No. The cupola, the dome, the onion dome. You know that. You know that shape. It sheds snow. I think that's why they made it like that, because it sheds snow.
Very similar to the kubba of the Muslims.
Yes, you have a similar shape too in some of your buildings. What do you call it then?
Kubba.
Kubba.
No.
I wonder how many words in Russian came from Turkish.
The Orthodox Jews living in Istanbul, they had the crescent over the Star of David, again to, like what we said earlier, certain Orthodox believers saying, you mentioned the Russians, who would rather be ruled under the Turks than to be ruled under
Rome. Yes, do you know who said that? George Kolaros. Yes, and he became Patriarch Gennadius.
What is that? Patriarch Gennadius?
Well, you know there was a Byzantine emperor who appealed to Rome to raise another crusade to push the Turks back from the walls of Constantinople.
And what they did there.
And the Pope. Oh no, I'm not talking about 1204.
No?
I'm talking about 1430s. What happened then was the Pope said, send your bishops to Florence, and if your bishops will agree to sign a union, because there was a schism between Rome and Constantinople. The two churches were not in communion.
Right.
Now the Pope said, you must agree to my terms to end the schism and recognize my authority as Christ's vicar on earth. So the emperor told the bishops to go to Constantinople, to Florence, and to sign this act of union in the year 1439. The bishops did so except for one, and that was Mark of Ephesus. And Mark of Ephesus refused to sign, but all the other bishops signed it, and this was supposed to be the end of the schism. Except that all the bishops, when they returned to Constantinople, they repudiated their signatures on this infamous act of union. But it was still promulgated in the West as a victory for Western Christianity over Orthodoxy. Now, there was a man named George Skolaros who was a scholar, and he lived in Constantinople, and he was very much opposed to active union with Rome. And he was the one who was reported to have said, better to see the Turkish turban in Constantinople than the papal tiara. And so, when Mehmet II entered Constantinople, the day after it was taken by his soldiers. Oh, by the way, there was a Hungarian in the Turkish side. His name was Urban, and he has invented this big cannon that would hurl these huge cannonballs against the walls.
The world's biggest at the time.
The world's biggest at the time. And, well, you know the story. In any case, when Mehmet entered the city, he gave commands that George Skolaros should be brought to him. Now, George Skolaros was taken by a soldier. It was going to be sold as a slave, but there were so many captives that were on the market for this that you could buy a slave for the price of a pair of shoes at that time. So, Mehmet and George Skolaros met together, Mehmet the Conqueror, and he told him that he would like him to be Patriarch of Constantinople. And the first thing that George Skolaros did when he was named Patriarch Gennadios was to repudiate the Union of Florence, which meant that the Pope had no reason to raise a crusade to liberate Constantinople from the Turks. So this was considered a very politically astute move on the part of Mehmet II. But I rather prefer your interpretation that it was a spiritual orientation that moved him in that direction.
You cannot separate now the spirit from the motives, because in our tradition also...
I'm afraid we do it very well in the United States.
No, that's the thing. What do you become when you separate? You become psychotic. Because we are not separate. Right now, as we are feeding our ego, we are also feeding our intelligence, and we're feeding our spirit. At the risk of sounding arrogant, but in our reading of the words of Christ, when he said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and render unto God what is God, it is not a separation of what belongs to Caesar and what belongs to God, because they are not equal. It is to say what is not God's, Caesar belongs to God. So now, Mehmet, we have to understand, when we address the Khalifas, the caliphs of the Ottoman Empire, in our tradition, it's not that we see them as perfect beings. They are humans, but they are the friends of Allah in our eyes. They are saints. And saints are guided to do certain things that we may never understand. And Sultan Mehmet Fatih, although he relied on what is current technology at that time to conquer Constantinople, Constantinia, the reason for his conquering Constantinople was because the Prophet says, the one who conquers Constantinople, he is the best of generals, and the army is the best of the army. They were racing to get that honor to be praised by the Prophet.
So it was a spiritual quest.
Of course it is
a spiritual conquest.
Of course it's a spiritual conquest.
Of course we never hear about that.
This is our side, and I don't blame people who don't believe, but at least let us tell our story every now and again. You have your narrative about, I don't mean you. I'm saying
please,
that,
more than just every now and again. We need to hear more from you.
This is our narrative, and Sultan Mehmet, the Constantinople was tried 23 times since the time of the Prophet. That one of the Prophet's companions, Ayyub Sultan, He was a companion, and is a saint of Allah, a believer, and a friend of Allah. He was buried just outside the walls of Constantinople in one of those quests. So, Constantinople, the Greek Orthodoxy, the Greek Church, and Islam's relation in our narrative. The relationship has been close since the time of the Prophet. The emperor that was ruling then, when the Prophet was the Prophet, when the Prophet was alive, he was not veiled from this world. His name was Heraclius. And just as the emperor of Abyssinia, who was also an Orthodox Christian at that time, and the emperor Heraclius, in our narrative, they were waiting for the last prophet. And the emperor of Abyssinia, he accepted the messengership of the last prophet, of the Prophet Muhammad. And Emperor Heraclius, he was visited often by the Arabs from Arabia, and they had trade missions with him, very close ties. And they came to him, and they said this new man came to declare himself a prophet. And Heraclius knew what he was. And he said, this man, has he ever told a lie? People back then, they have honor, they tell the truth. He says, well, until the age of 40, he has never told a lie. Because then it's impossible for this man who's never told a lie for 40 years of his life to suddenly wake up and to say that he's a prophet of God and to fool people. He says, who are his followers? This is his enemy speaking. His name at that time was Abu Sufyan. He was Abu Sufyan before he became a companion, before he became a believer. He was an enemy. And he said, people around him, they were the poor, the orphans, the indigent. He says, yes, that is another sign of the Prophet. Does he collect wealth? He says, no. So he went on to give a list of the criterion of prophethood. And our last prophet, Prophet Muhammad, he fulfilled every criteria. So in our narrative, Heraclius was also waiting for the last prophet. And the relationship again, now you say with Hagia Sophia.
Hagia Sophia.
They were about to build the largest cathedral in Christendom. And the emperor, if I'm not mistaken, is still Heraclius, if not his successor, asked advice from the prophet, saying we're trying to raise the biggest freestanding dome in the world. It's a house of worship. And the prophet said, his architects came to ask help from the prophet, and the prophet said, gather me some soil. And they took some soil to the prophet, and the prophet put his holy saliva in there, and he rolled it. And he says, now return this to your emperor and place it in each corner of the cathedral. When he returned and he did that, they managed to raise the dome. And he says that dome is going to be a house of worship for us too, when the day comes.
Hagia Sophia.
Hagia Sophia.
Holy wisdom.
Holy wisdom. And when the Hagia Sophia was taken, of course, in Orthodox Christianity, as far as I understand, icons are there. There were no statues.
No statues.
No
Only
statues.
2 dimensions.
Yes.
2 dimensions.
2 dimensions. And there was no call for destruction. It was only covering. With
It's
today,
mosaic.
covering with plaster the icons that were on the ceiling. That today they start peeling it to show that this is the respect and the veneration. This is a house of worship. And how is this house of worship different from another house of worship? There isn't, because we believe as people of the book we worship to the same Lord, to the same God.
You and I have the same God.
Yes.
You call him by a different name than we call him.
This is
But it's the same God.
Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, who spoke in Aramaic. The way that he calls God is much closer to the way that we call God. Allah. And that is how he spoke. And our way of calling God, it is Allah.
And the Jews say Yahweh?
Yahweh is Yahweh is not the name of Allah. This is a tetragrammaton. And they, in our tradition, we say it's Yahu. And Yahu is that one who is He.
He who is.
He who is. I am as I am. When they address, of course, they never use that. And they say Hashem, His name. It is too holy for them to mention. And they say His name as a third person. What did Mehmet, one of his first edicts as conqueror of conqueror of Constantinople is what? Come back. He says, you who are living here, come back. Come back because there's a change in management. But the company remains the same. We have to produce. And they did.
And they did. It was a great culture for such a long time.
And we are happy to remember it. And we're happy when we have people who remember that too. Because like I said before, people remember only terrible things. We had an empire and a culture in Constantinople, in Istanbul. We had a culture in Baghdad, the Sharif. Christians, Muslims and Jews. We had a culture in Spain, Andalusia.
Bakhtisarai in the Crimean Peninsula also. A very highly developed culture, by the way.
We had a culture in Damascus, where after a while, I say people of different religions, we are people of the book. Sit down, learn how to eat together.
To break bread together is a spiritual thing too.
Absolutely. So, if the purpose is only for this world and for the glory of this world and to collect riches, not to collect the name or to subjugate your enemies, there would not be a single standing church from Bosnia, sweeping all across the Middle East, to Spain, to Western China. But as we spoke before, the holiest shrine in Christianity, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, as far as I know, still stands.
Oh yes.
And interestingly, even the Israeli government didn't want to change, could not change the rules that the Ottomans have placed from centuries ago about the duties and the ownership and how things are supposed to work in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And the key that opens every morning still belongs to an old Ottoman family that then they would give to, I believe it was the Orthodox, yes, to open it, or he opens it himself.
We have a presence there. The Orthodox do have a presence there. You know, you speak of your narrative, and I must ask you a question.
Please, be comfortable.
Oh, I'm very comfortable here, but this is just one of those little minutiae of history. On the day that Constantinople fell, it was because someone had left a door open in the sally port in the Great Wall. Do you know anything about this?
Yes, I know about that very well.
Well, Western scholars that I have read haven't. They don't know who's responsible for that, and I'm wondering if your narrative, you have any information on that subject. It's not an important detail, but it's something I've been curious about, because those great walls had withstood many a siege up until 1453.
Right. I'm afraid I don't have any new information on that.
Well, all we know is that the emperor, his name is John, Constantine the 12th, I think it was. When he heard that the Turks were in the city, he tried to gather what few troops he had to expel them, and it was impossible. There were too many. So he essentially said, anyone who desires an honorable death, follow me. And he with a few followers, charged into the Turks, and he was killed, of course. Not a outcome that he himself had anticipated. And so the question was, who was responsible for leaving that gate open in the Great Walls? And that is lost in the fog of history, apparently.
Yes, but it worked out for the Muslims, huh? I wonder who did that. I've read that account in several history books, and they said that someone who, again, it's kind of tricky. It's tricky because it is as you know, history is written by the victors. And history that is written about an event that happened centuries ago. Who writes that history? I'm not privy to authentic Ottoman history about the events of that time. What I'm privy to is what Barnes and Nobles would allow me to read on that time. And again, it's someone else who's writing about our narrative.
Well, that's right. That's why I come to
Yes, I've heard of that. Okay, I've heard of that. And that's someone who had a personal grievance to the emperor, and who had a personal grievance to the emperor, and who accepted a bribe. He decided to leave that door open. So many things can happen. Strange things happens during the time of war. But when Sultan Mehmed, he tried to penetrate Constantinople, and he couldn't for some time. And he had a sheikh, he had a spiritual guide, a friend of Allah, a saint. Then he asked his sheikh, I'm doing everything correctly. Still, I cannot have victory. I cannot even come close. Because then you have the chains and the sea, and you have the walls.
over the Golden Horn.
Oh, it's almost impenetrable. Until he had to cross over the mountains with his ships and to land over the other side. That is not just spiritual insight, that is pure genius to be able to do that. But his sheikh says you will never be able to conquer Constantinople because there is a saint, there is a friend of Allah living within the walls, a Muslim. And he's going about there, and he is also running to have the praise from Allah and praise from the Prophet to say that he conquered Constantinople. And he is a Muslim, he is in disguise, he's living there, and he's saying, don't touch my little Greeks, he says. I will conquer them, but not through the sword. I will conquer their hearts. And the Shaykh says, as long as that saint is in power there, then there is no way that you'll be able to penetrate. So now we move to a higher hierarchy of politics of saints. Who arbitrates, who judges? Allah judge. Did Mehmed force his way through? He spent the whole night just praying. He says, if it is for me, let me have victory. If it is not for me, take my life now. And whole night he worshipped. And in the morning his sheikh came to him and said, Allah has answered your prayer. It is destined that you will conquer.
That's when the eclipse happened, I believe. An eclipse happened after he passed, I think. And the
yes, the eclipse happened, and he said, that friend of Allah, that saint there, Allah has taken his life. As long as he is alive, he's going to block you. So there is a certain sophistication of politics also that happens with the prophets and the friends of Allah.
But it seems like if he prayed, and his prayers were answered, this somehow transcends politics.
But what is the politics for? What is the transcendental nature of politics? And what is politics?
I suppose it's power, ordering a society in a way that either benefits the autocrat or benefits the people in general. I suppose that's the purpose of it.
It is ruling, and it is ruling either as a representative of our Lord, or ruling as a representative of our ego and of shaitan.
You know, of course, that the Morenos overran all of the Iberian Peninsula up to the Pyrenees.
Yeah.
And it was about 700 years they occupied Spain.
The Muslims, yes.
Yes.
800 years. Yes.
It was, yeah, the Reconquista. What was his name? Abdul in Granada.
Yes.
He was the last.
He was the last one, yes.
There's an interesting story they tell.
Boabdil. The Westerners called him Boabdil.
Abdul.
Yes.
Abdul.
Boabdil.
Abdul. Yes.
And supposedly, when he left, his mother said,
"Weep like a woman for what you could not defend as a man."
there you go. And
But he made a good effort, I think.
well, if someone comes to you and you're a tailor and presents you with a shirt that he took from a piece of cloth and he cuts it up and he tries to sew it, and he says, now I have this thing that is not a shirt, I've ripped it up, I've sewed it, please help me, you're a tailor, fix it. What can the tailor do? Not too much. Well, Abdul inherited that. And now when we're talking about the rulership and politics of Granada, and how, because they are Muslims, it doesn't exempt them if they're not spiritual, if they're not following the precepts, the spiritual precepts of the Prophet, then that mandate will be taken away from them very easily. And Allah will give it to someone. And Allah even says in the Quran, saying, if you don't rule properly, we will perhaps take the faith that we have given to you and give it to your enemies. And that we've seen happening in the history of Islam over and over. The Mongols who came and who had decimated the Muslim lands, and they were on their way to decimate the Christian lands. Of course, they destroyed Christianity in Central Asia. Yes, and that was I forget the term. What were they called? The what kind of Christians were they called in China?
There were Nestorians.
Nestorians, yes, the Nestorian Christianity. They finished that.
They were. Oh, that's right. The Nestorians were in China.
Yes, they were in China.
That's right.
They were very powerful, and the Nestorians, most of them were Turks. And they came and they swept, and they came and they destroyed Baghdad, and they made mountains of the skulls of the Muslim, in which they were the enemies, and they're saying that we are the what? The scourge of Allah. And the Muslims believed that because, again, Baghdad, although they were Muslims and they ruled, they strayed away. They strayed away from the way of truth, the way of orthodoxy. They became enamored of this world of power.
Materialism is a problem with the Muslims as well sometimes.
Materialism is a problem that's in everyone, and Islam is saying that, like what Rumi is saying, okay? Take what is in my hand. Do not look at what is in my hand, but take what is in my heart. If we take what is in our hand and we put it in the heart, that is blasphemy. That is idolatry. And that is what?
Idolatry.
Yes, that is idolatry. What is the meaning of worship? When you love something, you spend so much time thinking about it, your whole life is dedicated to it. Now the idolatry is not a thing that we form and we worship. The idolatry can be a car. The idolatry can be a philosophy. The idolatry, it can be politics. The idolatry can be anger. The idolatry can be revenge. So all that, in Islam we say, La ilaha illallah. There is no God. There's no being, there's no entity to be worshipped except for that ultimate reality, except for Allah, except for our Creator.
This language of worship that I heard this evening,
Yes.
Arabic? A classical Arabic.
Yes, it is.
Somebody named Harun al-Rashid maybe who would have spoken that.
He was an Abbasid.
Oh, not an Arab.
He is an Arab.
An Abbasid?
That is his dynasty.
Oh, I see. That's his dynastic name. You're
Yes.
not talking about Abyssinia as a...
No, not Abyssinia.
Oh.
Abbasid, the what we call coming from the Prophet's uncle. His name is Abbas. So from his lineage, that is after the Umayyad. And the Umayyad dynasty came right after the 4 Khalifas that ruled after the Prophet's time. Then the Umayyad dynasty happened. Then the Abbasids. The Umayyads, the center of rule was in Damascus. Then when the Abbasids, and these were Arabs, the Abbasids, they moved it to Baghdad. But after the Abbasids, when again the ruling of Islam became very splintered, it wasn't until the Ottomans who just took everything together and pieced everything together. Before that, it was very splintered. Now, Andalusia, Spain.
In Spain, yes.
Spain, we were talking about Spain. 800 years it was there, but it was a splinter from the Abbasid Empire. It was the last remaining scion of the house of the Bani Umayyah, the Umayyad dynasty, that he fled to Spain and he founded his own empire there that is distinct from the court of the Abbasid Empire in Baghdad. So he ruled, of course, commanding all the trade routes, made him very, very powerful,
lucrative, yeah.
Yes, very rich. But when there is dissension, again, when you fall in love with the world, there will be confusion and there will be dissension. So when that happened, and he was not able to hold again the mandate of the ruling of Islam, Allah gave victory to the Christians.
You know, there was something interesting going on in Spain. You seem to know something about just every subject.
Very little bit.
But there was something I wonder if you are aware of. I'd like to share it with you because it affected the relations between Rome and Constantinople.
Uh-huh.
You are speaking of similarities, and the people on the Iberian Peninsula, the indigenous people, felt those similarities because there was quite a bit of cooperation and mutual regard between the Muslims who came across from the Straits of Gibraltar and the local people. And when there were discussions about the differences between Islam and Christianity, the Muslims were pleased to inform the Christians in the Iberian Peninsula that we revere and honor Jesus Christ. We look upon him as a prophet. And the indigenous people were saying to their bishops, well, look, we have Christ and they have Christ. So what's the difference? So there was an emphasis, the response, of course, from the bishops was, well, we regard Christ not merely as a prophet, but the incarnate God, the second person of the Trinity. Now, this Trinitarian concept, don't ask me to explain it, because by definition it is a mystery. No one can explain it. How can there be one God but 3 persons in God? In any case, the original Nicene Creed, which came out of the Council of Nicaea 325 AD and the Council of Constantinople in 381 AD, it defined the doctrine of the Trinity.
Right.
And according to, if I may be permitted, according to the 6th article of the, I don't know which number article, but we say, as Christians, I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Lord and giver of life, who proceeds from the Father, who together with the Father and the Son is worshipped and glorified. Well, Rome felt it was necessary to insert the infamous filioque clause.
Yes, I've heard of that, yes.
And so it would read in English, and I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Lord and giver of life, who proceeds from the Father and the Son.
Right.
Filioque.
That was the bone of contention now.
That's right, and the reason they did it was because of the Muslims in the Iberian Peninsula saying, we have Christ and you have Christ, we are the same. But if Christ were merely a prophet, then the Holy Spirit couldn't proceed from the Father, or to the Son. They couldn't proceed from the Son, you see, if the Son were just a prophet. So they had to emphasize Christ's divinity by inserting the filioque clause and having the Holy Spirit proceed from the Father and the Son.
And this was 325 AD.
That was when that was 381.
381. But the Prophet came at 622.
The point is that 300-400 years later, the indigenous population on the Iberian Peninsula was ready to embrace Islam, and so the Pope felt it was necessary to insert the filioque
at that time
clause to make the Iberians understand the difference between Jesus as a prophet and Jesus the incarnate Son of God.
Right.
And this filioque clause that the Pope inserted in the Nicene Creed brought about the great schism in 1054 AD between Catholicism and Orthodoxy, because the Orthodox were saying, wait a minute, this creed is the property of the whole church. You don't have the right to change the creed unilaterally without consulting the rest of us. So this was a conversation. But it underscores something you said earlier, how the indigenous people in Spain began to understand the similarities between the two branches of faith, the two religions. You almost make it sound, as I'm listening to you, it's not two religions, it's just different aspects of the same religion.
I'm not trying to make it sound that way. That is how we believe, and that is how it is. Because in Islam, it is not as, again, the narrative that you read. You look at Islam and they say, Encyclopedia Britannica, Islam began in 622 by a shepherd, camel herder, who heard the voice of God in a cave, and he starts spreading social reform, and he starts a new religion.
That's what you read.
Exactly. But that's not how we read, and that is our narrative. So, who has more right now to tell you your story, other than yourself?
I think there are important elements of our story that are missing from our hearts.
And this is something that is very major for us, because we believe that the Prophet Muhammad came from a long line of prophets that all said
he had
the same
predecessors.
thing. 124,000 prophets that came before him since the time of Adam. And he was the first man and first prophet. Noah was a prophet.
Oh yes.
Yes. And the time of Abraham, and 70,000 prophets that were given to the Bani Israel. And one prophet that came from the Arabs, and that was the last prophet. 124,000 prophets. And they all said the same thing. So now, from our narrative, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, I don't mean to be, and it's like a full blossoming of a rose. That when Adam came, alayhi salam, it was like that. Then Nuh alayhi salam became like that. Then slowly it started opening and opening and opening. And with Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, he brought spirituality. And so as Sufis, you feel very close to him, because you start talking about spirituality. And start talking about diseases of the spirit, to reform the nation that he was sent to. He did not come with the law, he came with love. And now with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he came with the law and he came with spirituality, with love. And with these two wings, he says, now you can fly. If you only have the law, or you only have love, but you don't have both, you'd be like an airplane that has lost its engine, is just circling around the tarmac. You get dizzy, you may think you're going somewhere, but you have to have both to take off. So now our narrative is that the Prophet, and we're not even speaking about him as a prophet when Adam was between water and clay. We're not even speaking about him as a prophet when there was nothing except Allah. So we're not touching about him also as a spiritual entity. We're just speaking about him and his tradition. Now what he brought is nothing new. but it is to remind the people of the book, to remind all others that were given revelation, because in Islam it says that not only prophets from the Middle East or this or that, to every group, to every nation, we have sent a messenger. And that messenger brought just one message. And that message, it is free from dogma, because it just says, La ilaha illallah. There is no God but God. Don't make gods. Don't make yourself to be a god. Don't worship any other thing except for that one who created you. He deserves to be worshipped. And that is what is called a creed, a testimony of faith in Islam. When we say La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, Muhammad is the messenger of God. Every prophet came to say, turn your face away from this world to him that sent you. I am the prophet. So Adam is saying La ilaha illallah, Adam Rasulullah, the messenger of Allah. No, saying the same thing. Every prophet came to say the same thing. So that is our narrative. Now, to us, there is one way. And that way has always been the way that the prophets they brought. Now, Judaism may take a branch somewhere. They did not accept Ruhullah, the Spirit of Allah, which is Isa alayhi salam. We have so many similarities with the Jewish faith in terms of ritual. They pray 3 times a day, we pray 5 times a day. They fast, we fast. There's so many similarities now in terms of law between the laws of Moses and the laws of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. But it is made easier so that everyone can carry it. But they did not accept spirituality of Isa alayhi salam. In our belief, he was not crucified. In our belief, he was not crucified. He was switched. In our belief, and I'm not talking about unorthodox Muslim belief, this is Orthodox Muslim belief, that it was Judas Iscariot that was crucified. Their heads were changed. He was lifted body and spirit to the paradise by the angels, and he will return to bring the Ahli Kitab together. Now, this is our belief. But Jesus brought spirituality. Isa alayhi salam. You see, it's very unusual for me just to say his name without putting, may the peace of God be with him.
Isa salam.
Alayhi salam. So, the Jews, those who were not believing in him, unfortunately, they said so many insulting things about him and his mother.
Oh.
And we say Maryam Anna means mother. We call her Maryam Anna. She was a virgin. Maryam.
That's
in our
Miriam.
way,
That's
yes.
Mary.
That's Mary.
Ah.
Mother Mary. Maryam Anna means Mother Mary. We address her as Mother Mary. She is described in the Quran as the highest woman that Allah has ever created. Higher in spiritual rank than even, say, the mother of the Prophet or his wives. And the Jews called Isa alayhi salam, some of them that were in power at that time, saying that he is, Astaghfirullah, may Allah forgive me, that he is the illegitimate, the bastard son of a Roman soldier who copulated
With Maryam.
Yes, with Maryam, Astaghfirullah. that his miracles were a product of his years in Egypt learning the black arts.
Oh my goodness, that's Jewish.
This is
Some of them, though, not all.
I taught yeshiva students for over 7 years.
And you mean
This is Orthodox.
This is Orthodox
Christian,
Judaism?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
That if you don't believe, I mean, I'm not saying that you're doubting me or whatever, but open the Talmud and read what it says. It's there. And this is unfortunate. Okay? So they did not accept Jesus, Isa alayhi salam. They say he's evil. Now understanding the Christians, they love him so much, and they say that he is the son of Allah, and In our understanding, what Isa alayhi salam brought was to say, way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has created me and has given me to be close to Him. He has given to each and every one of you. And the way to reach Him now, it is through me. Therefore He says, you don't go to the Father except through me. And that is exactly what the Muslims believe when Isa alayhi salam says, Isa Rasulullah. So there is no God but God, and I am your way, the way to lead to Him. We just finished the Maghrib, the sunset prayer, and in our tradition, the sunset prayer, it is the prayer that is inherited from Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, when He prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, where He prayed.
So He is the great prophet among you.
He is the greatest after the Holy Prophet Muhammad. After which, Ibrahim alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam, there were 5 prophets. We call Nabi Musa the highest level prophets. And Isa alayhi salam is there. His work, in our belief, is not finished. Isa. His work is not finished, and he is going to come back. So, this is what we're waiting for. So, this is, you see, then with Islam, our narrative is the Prophet Muhammad came to complete the religion that was revealed since time immemorial.
Ah, I see. When you speak of the book, and other Muslims that I have known say that we Christians and Jews are people of the book. And I would like to test my understanding of this, and I can ask you a correct question directly. Is it correct that the book is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy? Is that the book? We call that the Mosaic Law, or the Torah. They call it the Torah. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. That's the book.
2 books.
2 books.
People of the book, meaning people who are given books, given kitab. Kitab means holy book, holy revelations. Of course, the prophets did not write it down and give it. The book was themselves, and they were speaking. The book that was given to Musa and Moses was the Torah, and the book that was given to Jesus is the Injil, the Evangel. And the book that was given to David, the Zabur, the Psalms, and the book that was given to Muhammad ﷺ is the Quran. 4 major books, but there are 100 books that came before. These are called suhuf, or pages. Some were given to Adam ﷺ, some given to Noah, some given to different prophets, but 4 major books, they're given to these 4 major prophets. So now the book, when we say people of the book that was given to the Jews, the Torah Sharif, the honorable Torah, the honorable Torah. The book, whether it is something that's literal or teachings that is compiled in the person, that was given to Isa alayhi salam, to Jesus, is the Injil, the Evangel. So this is what we mean by the book.
By the book, you actually are speaking of 4 books.
Yes, I'm speaking of 4 books.
And the Injil, the Gospels.
Yes, the Gospels, the Evangel.
You have those too.
We have those teachings too. We have the teachings of Moses. We have the teachings of Isa, Jesus. We have the teachings of all the earlier prophets. That is in the Quran, which we call is the Kitab, the mother of the book.
Right now in the United States, unfortunately, people who are Muslims are feared. And I think, there's this fellow, what was his name? Whoever declared himself the Caliph. Abdul...
Omar or something?
No, not Omar. It was just last Abu Bakr.
Abu Bakr.
Yeah. And he was saying, Ubayr Khalid. And now there's been some discussion about directives from ISIS to Muslims in the United States to conduct acts of terror against. I don't feel, here I am a Christian, I don't feel like I'm in mortal danger being.
Why should you though? Because I don't enter into the midst of Christians. Also, I'm saying that the ridiculousness of this frenzy that comes about. I don't enter into Christians or Greeks or Catholics to say that, oh, you are crusaders,
but would
or you are KKK members, just because certain people belonging to certain faiths, they have used that in a very terrible way, you know?
Well, I understand that, of course, but wouldn't it every American could sit here where I'm sitting now and be in your presence and listen to the things you're saying? I feel your, well, first of all, I feel your warmth, I feel your hospitality, I feel at home here, I feel very comfortable here.
This, John, this has been the tradition of Islam since the time of the Prophet.
But why we don't know it? Americans tend not to know this.
Why don't they know?
Well, that's because you don't speak loud enough, perhaps.
Whoever is given the microphone to speak, it's not given to me. The microphone is given to others, and they speak.
Well, I have a column in a newspaper down there in Carbondale, and every once in a while I write a column about Islam. And I write that, you know, I lived among Muslims and they are hardworking, law-abiding people, and they're not to be feared, that they are making a positive contribution to the society in which they live. And, you know, I cite names of different individuals who've made significant contributions in science and literature and so on and so forth. I can send you copies of my columns. I mean, it's not a...
That is very enlightened of you in this current situation, to be standing up against the tide, lone voice in the wilderness.
Oh, that was my patron saint, John the Baptist, a voice crying in the wilderness. Yes. My patron saint. He lost his head because he couldn't keep his mouth shut.
Yes. that is our prophet. We believe in him. He is quoted in the Quran.
Well, I don't mean to beg comparison with him.
No. We understand your reverence for him. We feel very close to him as well. This is what I mean. And when I mention Yahya in there as John the Baptist, this is because he is a cousin of Isa alayhi salam.
Yes, he is.
We feel close to him. Out of the 124,000 prophets that are named, only 25 are mentioned by name in the Quran.
And he is among them.
He is amongst them. He is amongst them. Yes, this is also your home, please. Whenever you're traveling, be comfortable.
You know, the Turkish soldiers who took our people, our boys, they really thought they were doing them a favor because they were bringing them into Islam and giving them nourishment. Well, I don't see it as a negative thing.
No, it's not. It is a favor. Because the Yanishari is not, they didn't conscript them to become laborers, or to become slaves, working with manure, or to be laborers here. The Yanishari is a crack elite unit that is only answerable to the sultans. So understand now, if the press that we're given about the Muslim conquerors, the Turkish conquerors who forcibly took Christian boys from unwilling parents to come and to serve the rest of their lives next to the Sultan. What a mistake that would be, to put the children of your enemies next to the Sultan, where they still have within living memory of their own faith and of their own parents. It is, as our Shaykh told us, there are so many Muslim parents who pretend that they are not Muslims to try to have their children conscripted. Yes, because it is a To be trained as a Janissary is to be set for life. It is maybe akin to West Point or something even higher than that.
Well, in point of fact, there were a few of these conscripted boys who became
Kuba. No.
I wonder how many words in Russian came from Turkish.
The Orthodox Jews living in Istanbul, they had the crescent over the Star of David, again to, like what we said earlier, certain Orthodox believers saying, we mentioned the Russians who would rather be ruled under the Turks than to be ruled under
Rome. Yes, you know who said that? George Kolaros. Yes, and he became Patriarch Gennadius.
What is that? Patriarch Gennadius?
Well, you know there was a Byzantine emperor who appealed to Rome to raise another crusade to push the Turks back from the walls of Constantinople.
And what they did there.
And the Pope. Oh no, I'm not talking about 1204.
No?
I'm talking about 1430s. What happened then was the Pope said, send your bishops to Florence, and if your bishops will agree to sign a union, because there was a schism between Rome and Constantinople. The two churches were not in communion.
Right.
Now the Pope said, you must agree to my terms to end the schism and recognize my authority as Christ's vicar and viziers and second only in power and authority to the Sultan himself.
It will be foolishness.
It was a meritocracy and it worked very well.
That is something that I appreciate coming from Singapore. Meritocracy.
Oh, is that the way it was there?
And that is the way that is told to us, and by and large. Of course, other factors also come in play, you know. But you are judged by not your race or your religion, but how useful you can be, according to your merit, to serve the people in the empire. And you cannot have a system of meritocracy if it is pure colonialism. It is impossible.
It's not possible.
It's impossible. It is easy to conquer. It is easy to conquer. It is very difficult to rule. And it's almost impossible to rule justly for hundreds of years. The easy way out, like we've talked about before, is just to change their language, change their religion, or make them to become subjects that forever aspire to be as like the colonial masters. But you can never be. And so for the rest of our lives, we'll be like trained monkeys. But that is a policy that, like we said before, that the Ottomans, and I want to say Ottomans as opposed to the Turks, because again, in Turkish, the idea was Ottomanism, that they say that is a name given to everyone under our realm, be they Christian, Jewish or Muslim, Turkish, Arab, or whatever race that you belong to.
Plus the Viennese were able to maintain their. They withstood the Turks, but they made some. Oh, thank you. Yeah. They made some sort of a pastry in the shape of a crescent, which they learned from the Turks somehow.
Well, until today, is a the crescent, the croissant.
Croissant, yeah. Is it true? As far as you know?
It is true.
It is true.
That is the shape of Islam. There is the crescent moon. And in their hatred, they eat that.
Yes. And the hatred, is it? Well, I never took one to my mouth with a feeling of hatred.
No, because you're not living at that time and you don't understand what it means. It's like if Muslims were to make bread, in the shape of a crucifix, to celebrate our victory over the Christians, and we're to celebrate it and we eat it. Okay, throughout centuries, maybe they lost the meaning, but
now it's because you know in some of the churches in Russia, there's a cross over the crescent on the top of the cupola, the domes.
yes,
The kupa?
Cupola, the dome,
Cupola.
the onion dome. You know that.
the kuba.
You know that shape. It sheds snow. I think that's why they made it like that. Because it sheds snow.
Very similar to the kuba of the Muslims.
Yes, you have a similar shape too in some of your buildings. What do you call it then?
Although, in fact, one of the reasons why the revolution happened in Ottoman Turkey by the Young Turks, one of the claims is that because the Ottomans favored the other races and religions more than they do their own Turkish people. So it became nationalism.
Oh,
It became nationalism.
I know something went wrong in the Ottoman Empire toward the end.
Yes.
There was a woman named Oksana who was, you know about.
That was earlier. Oksana
Wasn't she the consort of Suleiman?
was the wife. The only sultan with the only wife.
She was that? She
Yes.
was, from Ukraine, I think.
Yes, I know. She accepted the way, she accepted the religion, she became a beloved of the Sultan. And
Was she the mother of Selim?
yes, she was.
And he was less than, he had some problems.
He did work that was given to him, that was necessary for him.
There was, Suleiman actually was at Mohaç and defeated the Lajos the first, the young king of Hungary at Mohaç,
Right.
1526. Then it was in 1529 that was it Suleiman that laid siege to Vienna
Yes,
in 1529?
I believe, yes.
And it was a strange thing because